wanted to get into Woman Who Made Me. And I had to really, really think about this. And I decided to go to my own lineage. I decided to go to my own family. And I genuinely consider myself privileged. And I think, hey, I've run my own businesses. I've worked in corporate. I went to university. I drive a car. I have a house. I have a bank account. All these things, I have them. And for me, it was a no-brainer. Of course, I'm going to have a car. Of course, I'm going to have my own business. Of course, I'm going to own a house. Of course, I'm going to have money that I call my own. But then without realizing that this wasn't always the case. And starting with my own grandmothers, like I said, I wanted to go into my own lineage. From my dad's side, my paternal grandmother, her name was Beauty, and she didn't go to school. And from sitting with her and listening to her story, she basically didn't know her parents. She was born, she didn't know her parents, and she was raised by her younger sister. And she just never went to school. And that was just her life. Her life was to get a husband who'd take care of her, bear some children, and that was it. And that was it. And I mean, she didn't tell enough stories for me to know what was happening in her heart or what she desired. But I think even with working, my grandmother worked as a cleaner for a very short time, and she had 11 kids. So literally every single year of her life for a good 11, 12 years, she was pregnant, she was taking care of children, and that's all there was. And it's not to say that that's not a beautiful thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I genuinely believe, based on conversation and the type of woman she was, very opinionated, a leader, so strong and, very firm in her beliefs. I really, really believe that if she had the opportunity or the exposure that I have, I genuinely think she could have been great. She could have done amazing things outside of just being a support to her partner, to her husband. And so my grandmother lived in KZN, the rural areas of KZN, very, very poor, huge yard, a lot of children, whereas my grandfather would leave and go and work, and then he would come home, I guess, once in a while. And that was just life. And as a woman, she knew, as a Zulu woman, she cooks for her family and she takes care of her family. And my grandmother never learned how to read. I don't think she ever learned how to write. But one thing, my grandmother knew the Bible off by heart. Off by heart, my grandmother knew scripture. She taught us scripture and she taught us songs. And I often wondered, Koko, how do you know the word? And it's not like she wouldn't paraphrase. Like we paraphrase scripture. I paraphrase scripture because I sometimes just don't know like the exact scripture. My grandmother never paraphrased. She knew it. Amahubo. She would say it word for word. And how my grandmother learned the Bible was my cousin who she raised would read to her, and that's exactly how she learned it. So can you imagine, with the access that I have and the knowledge that I have, and I paraphrase some verses, but she had to depend on someone to read for her, and she still managed to learn it and to understand it and to teach it. That for me is incredible, to a point where if my cousin was like lazy and she wanted to skip a chapter, my grandmother would know that, no, you're skipping a chapter, do it correctly. So can you imagine a woman like that with opportunities, the incredible things she could have done? But she paved the way, and that's why I'm talking about lineage, because she's the one who taught us some songs. She's the one who taught us some scriptures. She taught us a way of life. So the reason why I'm telling this is that nothing was in vain, but we do have to look at our opportunities and look at the opportunities the people in our lineage had, and really, really be grateful and celebrate with so much respect. Then I look at my grandmother from my mother's side, Agnes, who is still alive, and she loves to tell her story. So she came from quite a big family, but her mother left to be with another family, and she basically raised herself as well while living with her grandmother. And she tells us about how they used to, I think she used to make a bra with isaga lempuphu. It's what do we call it? It's the material of like I think like a 10 kg maize meal. I don't think you find them anymore. You probably do, but that material, that's what they use to make bras. And my grandmother was and still is very innovative, and she basically put herself through school, and she met my grandfather when she was very very young, and he encouraged her to finish school. And so my grandmother, while my grandfather was a teacher and she was with him, and she had, I think my mother, I could be wrong, my grandfather said, well, I am going to teach you to be a teacher. And my grandmother didn't think, I don't think she had a matric at the time, and she had to learn, but outside. So my grandfather would bring material from the school that my grandmother would study at home while nursing my mother, I guess. And then my grandmother would go and write the exam at the end of the year, and she would be top student. She was top student, and she didn't even attend. She barely attended class because she had a baby to raise, and there was just not that opportunity. She grew up in a very poor, in a family where she didn't have that access. And so my grandmother studied from home. And my grandfather said, okay, now it's time for you to be a teacher. My grandparents are very learned people. They've contributed a lot to the education system. And my grandfather said, okay, now it's time for you to be a teacher. And my grandfather helped my grandmother become a teacher. And she became a teacher, and then she started teaching. And eventually, by the time she retired, my grandmother was a principal, and she's done quite a few things in the education system. And can you think, if she didn't have a husband like my grandfather who would say, hey, I'm going to teach you, but you're not just going to sleep on this potential. My grandmother was an A student, and she could have lost out on opportunity because it just didn't matter if a girl child goes to school or not, if a girl child gets a job or not. And because there was no exposure, who knows what my grandmother could have become. She was an A student who wasn't even attending class, and she was making her own bras from material. So can you imagine, with that amount of will, resilience, strength, Zotini, what's the word, intention, like being an A student while nursing a baby and not attending class, like that for me is mind boggling. And I think of when I was in school, what it took for me to get an A in my comfortable position. So that was my grandmother, my grandmother Agnes, who even till this day she still teaches. She's retired. Up until I think COVID, she used to go to the primary school in Middleburg, and she would go teach the kids there. Now she teaches them Zulu because she just loves it and she doesn't want to chill at home. And so you realize, man, that women are absolutely, absolutely amazing. And those women paved the way. And both my grandmothers, maternal and paternal grandmothers, are very strong-willed women, very, very confident women who know who they are and who are firm in their beliefs. And you know what? Such leaders. Like my grandmothers, when I think about them, both of them are such leaders. And then we come to my mother, my own mother, who grew up in boarding school. I think my mom, if I'm not correct, went to boarding school at the age of 6 years old. Then again, you look at the circumstances. My grandmother was trying to get her job in teaching. Life, everybody was just trying to make the best. Everyone was just trying to pave a better future for everyone. So I guess my grandparents thought it's better if my mom goes to the school. And my mom spent her whole schooling in boarding school, and she too was an A student. My mom finished school at the age of 16, and she was an A student. She went to varsity. She studied to be a teacher, and she started teaching, I think, from the age of 21, if I'm not mistaken, from a very, very young age. And I think a long time ago, I had a conversation with my mom, and I asked, and I said, Mom, why did you never ever like try going to this career? Because I think by then opportunities had opened up. And my mom said, well, I had to choose, do I choose opportunities that take me away from home where I can't be fully present as a mother, or do I choose my job that I have and grow in that. And it's just those sacrifices that a woman has to make. And I don't think my dad had to, and this is with all respect, my dad never had to make that decision of, do I choose to chase careers, or do I choose to be at home? I mean, my dad traveled, and so did my mom. It's not like she was put, but as a woman, especially then, your primary or your expected response is to say, I choose to stay at home. And there's nothing wrong, like I said, everything with context, nothing wrong with choosing to stay at home, and nothing wrong with being a traveling person. But now we actually have that choice without feeling judged. Then it was almost like, if you do that, what about your family? So my mom was that hardworking woman, and my mom was at every single netball game that I had, every concert that I had. My mom forced me to go to speech classes because she saw the potential in me that, hey, I think this child's going to be a good speaker. I didn't want to go to those classes with Mrs. Fraser Bow. It was Wednesday afternoon. Kids were going home, going to play with their friends. And here I am staying for a speech and drama class. But it was worth it. She saw something in me. And just like my grandmother saw fit that my mom should go to boarding school for better opportunity, my mom also thought I should play every sport there is. My mom thought I should go to speech and drama class so that I can be the best version of me. And all that has contributed to who I am. And then, and yeah, so there's a lot to say about my mother, but I recognize the sacrifices she made. And I'm genuinely so grateful that both my grandmothers and my mother made sure that I look at myself not just as a woman who has kids or someone who should find a husband, but as a leader, as a confident person, as someone who's deserving. And in our home, we weren't raised to think the boys will do better, the boys will earn more money. We were raised to think we're just as good. But that comes from somewhere. And I think a whole lot of unlearning from my grandmothers and my mother.